but it's been important to me, I think, to make sure that we have that network. And I think then off the back of that, what is it that you get from that network? It's the views of other people, the feelings, thoughts, the ideas, what they've heard, what they're hearing, perhaps even honest, constructive feedback to you as an individual, as a person, as a leader, as a business, as a brand, etc., etc. And I think all of those are really important.
Welcome to today's episode of The Entrepreneur. My name is Nana Kapoor, and in each episode, I have real unscripted conversations with an entrepreneur or intrapreneur. The biggest common denominator with all my guests, they are serial thinkers and full-time introspectors. I ask them two big questions in each episode. One, the worst decision they have ever made. I want to hear from them how their bad decisions turned into lifelong lessons. Two, the best decision they have ever made and how it's become their life mantra. Post listening, I hope you find some food for introspection and find the answers from within to meet your personal and professional goals. Are you ready to become an entrepreneur? Hey guys, on today's podcast, we have Stuart Thornton, the CEO and co-founder of Asia's leading omnichannel buy now, pay later company, Hula. They're live in Singapore, Malaysia, and Hong Kong, and soon in Thailand, Korea, and the Philippines. Hula lets customers get the things they want or need responsibly by splitting purchases in short-term, interest-free monthly repayments. The company helps solve a merchant's greatest challenge of consumer visits, conversion, basket size, and loyalty, and they create an enhanced value proposition for their customers. Stuart is passionate about growing businesses, his morning coffee, building meaningful relationships, and making people smile. I've been following Stuart's journey for a while now, so I'm really excited to have him here. Hey, Stuart, thanks for being here. How are you?
I'm very well, and lovely to be here as well. Thank you very much. Lovely introduction.
Yeah, I thought it was really cute. I think it's morning coffee. That does sound like a really essential part of your day.
It absolutely is. I'm a different person without it.
Yeah, I know what that means because my husband's just the same, and you do not want to talk to him if he does not have his coffee. Awesome. Well, let's get straight into it, Stuart. I am really interested to know, and I'm sure our listeners are as well, what do you think is the best decision you've ever made in your life?
Wow, it's a hard one, I think, to probably call out. I think we make lots of decisions every single day. There's big decisions and small decisions, and I think perhaps there's an element of recency here in how I would answer that sort of question. But I think doing what I'm doing at the moment, and maybe it's a bit sort of cliche perhaps, but actually going off and doing something that I always dreamed of doing, of setting up a company, and I think I've described it as in the past of working with amazing people and doing great things. And I think Jeff Bezos put it much better than I did, but work hard, have fun, make history. There's something to be said for that, I think, in terms of that. And so I think the best decision I made most definitely was committing and making the sacrifice to go and set up a business from the start, a startup company. And I think that was most definitely, when I look back, probably one of the best moments of my life and career, I think, to date. Just because I think of the sort of sheer enjoyment, good and bad, perhaps, that I get out of that.
Nice. What do you think pushed you to doing that? Because it takes courage.
Yeah, I never really thought about that at all. I think there's probably a few different drivers. My father has his own company. I saw him take that plunge, perhaps around a sort of similar age, maybe slightly younger. He took that risk, that sacrifice. He had confidence perhaps in himself to build something and put something together. And I think there's probably an element of that personality or characteristic that found its way to me in that sort of situation. So perhaps in terms of influence or parental or family influence, that was a big part of it. I think also I've always been the kind of person, I'm not very good at working in big companies, I think. I'm not sure I should admit that, but I have it's like being in a job interview. I have a distinct lack of patience as a person, and I want to get things done, and I want to move quickly and create things. And I think in a big company, you tend to have a different approach. And there are some amazing people I've worked with that are brilliant at that. And I think setting up a startup, you've got to have that hustle. You've got to have that ability to control your destiny. And so I think that was also a critical driver from my perspective. I'd say the third thing, because all good things come in threes, of course, was probably opportunity, of seeing an opportunity. I've always had a folder full of ideas and business ideas. And I think that whilst they were perhaps good ideas, none of them were necessarily scalable or doable, or perhaps I didn't have enough experience or knowledge or something else to go and make them come alive, or maybe it wasn't the right time. And with this particular opportunity, I think it was worth the sacrifice. The return on investment was a great potential, and I think that's probably what tipped me over the edge in terms of making that sacrifice personally, and from a financial perspective, and from a work perspective too, to try and make it come alive. Not an easy decision back then, if I'm honest, but I'm very glad I did.
For sure. I think when people make these decisions, they always think about the personal sacrifices they need to make and financial sacrifices, because the money is not immediate, right? It does take time for it to come around. And I feel like you're either made for it, this kind of hustle, or you're made for a bigger company where it's a bit more comfortable. And you're obviously the sort of person who prefers that hustle and making impact and doing something a lot bigger. What do you think has opened up for you as a result of this?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think there's so many different ways to answer that question. Open up, I would say things like friendships and network, the people I've met along the way, and including the people that, are part of the hula business, the co-founders, the leaders, the people that have joined the company. Those friendships and network that I've had the fortune of being a part of and learning from and sharing that journey. I mean, that's probably the most rewarding part of doing this, I think. Just that the doors that have opened to those kind of relationships are incredible. Secondly, I would say the learning has been phenomenal as well. I mean, a lot of people do an MBA, for example. I've never been in that opportunity or had that opportunity to do so, but I feel like I'm probably doing that on the job at the moment at the same time, because the learning that you have to go through from building a business and managing people and strategy and structuring organization and raising money and all the other wonderful bits and pieces that come with it. You have to educate yourself quickly in flight to bring yourself up to speed, especially when you're leading the business and having to have that expectation. And then I think there's probably the third thing is that sort of personal satisfaction of perhaps that was missing in previous careers, or some of the best jobs I've had were ones where I've been working in a startup autonomous environment, and perhaps the opposite being the opposite in terms of that sort of personal return and the feeling that I get from the varied days that I have, the pain points, the good points. It's definitely, I think, contributed to probably some of the happiest times of my life as well as a result of that. So I think it's definitely three very strong outcomes and the doors that have opened for me.
If I had to ask you, every morning when you wake up, now that you're running your own business, what really excites you in the morning before you start?
The coffee that's waiting in the kitchen.
Once you've had the coffee.
Then I'm really excited. What excites me, these days it's the days are quite challenging because there's a lot of stuff to get through. We're working from home still at the moment, and with that tends to be the call after call. But I think the thing that excites me the most is, I think I touched on it, previously. It's the varied nature of at least what I'm working on. And again, maybe it's to pick up on that last answer, the people that I get to meet and work with as well. But in the morning, it could be meeting a customer, then it could be a partner, then it could be talking about cash flow and commercial opportunities. It's looking through a strategy, reviewing a contract. You really have so many different conversations that have to happen. You could be talking to the board, it could be talking to investors. It just, you literally could be going on a podcast. You're literally taking one hat off and putting a new one on very quickly, and the opportunity to go and have to change that view and what's the word? I don't know really what it is, really connect in, connect out. It's quite invigorating almost, I think, as a result of that. Quite tiring at the end of the day, but it's incredibly exhilarating.
I get what you mean, because I think one of the biggest things I struggled with COVID-19 and the work from home was just the people interaction, because as much as I'm a bit of an introvert, I thrive on people. I thrive on getting knowledge from people and exchanging ideas. And I feel like I was a bit upset when I couldn't get that as much. And then I started joining a few more virtual communities so I could get in touch with more people and things like that, just to keep that alive in me, because I genuinely thrive on people. Well, I'm so happy to hear that one of the best decisions was having the courage to start your own business. And I really hope that people who hear this feel inspired as well. But if I had to ask you, what do you think is, well, I can't really call it the worst decision, but let's say a bad decision that you've learned from, what would that be?
Yeah, listen, I think, again, I'll probably take this as an opportunity. I mean, the ideation for some of this business started a long time ago, really, or at least a good year and a half, 2 years earlier. And where we are now, I sometimes think that, if I had made the decision earlier, I'm not sure if it's a bad decision, but it was the sort of taking the time on that to try and get into a position to do that. Perhaps that was at least the decision that perhaps I reflect on as maybe not being optimal, because we perhaps would have been quicker, better, whatever that may be. But I think, like anything that you do, the learning from that decision is the most important thing. And I think the learning from that really is, and there's an element of using, a lot of people talk about data-driven decision making, and I'm all in for that. We are most definitely in Hula, but there's an element of that sort of personal aspect, the gut, that decision. And I perhaps sometimes wish I'd made that decision quicker and listened to my heart rather than my head quicker, and from that perspective. But I think that can, knowing yourself and that decision-making process, you can probably, you learn from that and how you make decisions in future as well. And knowing yourself or how you were feeling at that time to see it again in the future and know that there could be a better outcome in the future. I don't really ever regret anything I've done, you see, exactly, in that regard. So it's very hard to say a bad decision, because that would say that a bad decision meant regret. And I don't ever regret anything that I've done. And I try not to, because I don't think you can't go back and change it. So I can only think about something I probably could have done better or quicker, I think, as a result of that question.
Yeah. And I've noticed that with all of my guests so far, actually, no one regrets anything. They've just learned from it, because sometimes you just don't know any better. The timing wasn't right, whatever it was. But I'm so glad that no one's actually hard on themselves. They've all just learned from that to make better decisions or to shape their decisions based on that experience. But, you mentioned this whole concept of trusting your gut. And I'm curious to know, because most of my guests have also talked about this. And I'd like to know from you, Stuart, how do you make decisions now? Do you trust your heart more? Do you trust your gut more? Do you focus on aligning everything? How do you do it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think I've really looked at that process at all in that way. I would say, again, there's all, what is the sort of subject matter? If I'm looking in the business, for example, I think there's a little bit more data that one has to take into account. Right? I think we have to be a little bit more thoughtful. I mean, I like to ask questions and make sure I'm educated and have really strong, good, trusted people, in the team to rely on that as well. I think that is definitely one of the things that we've done really well in this business from that perspective. And I like to, think that through and talk that through, get other people's ideas and those different views. Diversity in our team is pretty good as well, and I think that gives us a very good alternative view. And then really thinking probably at the absolute core, what is it, the problem that we're really trying to solve? And then I think listening to my experience and myself, maybe that's where that gut comes in, and then looking at all of those different data points and then making that decision and committing to it, I think probably is the most important thing. There are different types of decisions. You've got big ones and perhaps sort of small ones. Those big ones can be a little bit more harder to turn back, but again, you have to do that with commitment, I think, and again, never regret. Yeah. I'm a bit of an eternal optimist anyway, as a personality, and one of my favorite sayings is every cloud has a silver lining. You can always turn something into a positive. So I tend to look at life in that view as well.
Yeah. Now I'm really interested to know, what do you do on a bad day? How do you lift yourself up?
I think this is an interesting question as well. I think one of the things I always ask in an interview as well when people come in, I talk about, you get into typical corporate interviews, it talks about motivation. What's motivating you now? Maybe it's money, or it's fame, or it's career progression. And you hear all those things. I said, they're all wonderful, but tell me, what is it that you're really motivated by? What is it really I see motivation almost like an iceberg. You've got the bit you can see at the top, which is the bits that I just shared, but it's the bit underneath the water that I really want to get to know. Because if you don't know that, you really don't know what pushes a person, what sort of gets them back on that horse after being knocked off, so to speak. I think that's really the important thing. So I often ask that of other people. I don't think I've really asked that of myself, but if I look at it, one of the most important things for myself, it's maybe more of a personal driver. I have a beautiful daughter who unfortunately lives in Australia, which makes that a little bit harder for me to be a father and a dad. But I've been very open about this. I look at her, and I've got a photo of her here, and I look at her, and she's my inspiration and my motivation, because I've made that sacrifice to be away for her. If that's the case, I'm going to sure as hell work as hard as I can and make it a good day to make sure I'm making her proud.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like after a certain point in life, well, maybe there are some people like that still, but I personally feel after a certain point, money can't be a motivation anymore. There has to be something deeper and more personal, and that really hits the heart to get you to get up the horse, like you mentioned, on a bad day or when you fall down. And I think I look at myself, and money used to motivate me, but not anymore. There's so many other things that now really drive me. With that being said, like I said, I'm sure there are a lot of people who still get motivated by it, and with all due respect, but it doesn't work as much anymore, right? You gotta.
Yeah, you're right. I think I read an article the other day that what is the true motivation of a person, and the true motivation of a person, and you really strip out all of the other elements that are sometimes circumstantial or situational of importance. Yeah. It comes down to purpose, and people need to have that purpose in their life. They need to know where they're going, why they're going, how they're going to get there, which is why it's so important, I think, to be considerate of that in a business as well, and but personal and work. And I think you're right. Some people perhaps put money, for example, in front of purpose, but really when push comes to shove, money can actually become less important if they're not enjoying themselves and what they're doing, and have purpose and focus on what they're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and then money will come after that, right? Great. Well, this leads me to my next question nicely on where you are today. What is the best resource you used to get you where you are personally, mentally, professionally? What do you think?
Best resource, that's an interesting thing. It probably comes back down to the people aspect, the network. I actually had a chat with this fella the other day who's just starting up his own business, and he said, have you got any tips or advice? And I said, well, one of the first things you should do is network like crazy. You just don't know what door opens for you and what conversation can lead, and that network becomes so important. I think you mentioned it earlier on about COVID-19, and that connection to people. It doesn't matter whether you're introverted or extroverted. It's that handshake or fist pump or whatever it is these days, elbow pump, that absolutely opens those doors. And so I think when I look back at my career, really, I think that's where I've been able to, not the best at it or not the worst at it, but it's been important to me, I think, to make sure that we have that network. And I think then off the back of that, what is it that you get from that network? It's the views of other people, the feelings, thoughts, the ideas, what they've heard, what they're hearing, perhaps even honest, constructive feedback to you as an individual, as a person, as a leader, as a business, as a brand, etc., etc. And I think all of those are really important. Sometimes that can create a lot of noise, and it comes down to you to try and find that best path through that noise as well, based on your own values and purpose and path. But I think that would probably be the most important resource I've had, is that connection to people and feedback and the ability to perhaps listen.
Absolutely. I would 100% agree with that. I'm curious to know though, how do you choose what's noise and what to actually pay attention to?
Yeah, I think it comes back down to, again, the sort of purpose piece and the how you make decisions piece as well. You've got to know where you're going, and you've got to know how you make a decision. It's based, again, on your own experience, your own views, opinions, thoughts, feelings, what's important to you. But then also, again, listening to all those sort of trusted feedback loops. I mean, we can see that today with, is Facebook a trusted feedback loop for me? No, it's absolutely not. Not when it's telling me that 5G created COVID. So I think that one has to be a little bit careful around the trusted source, perhaps as part of that sort of process.
Yeah, I guess it's all about us doing our own due diligence based on our values and what we believe in and our purpose. And based on that, we listen to what we want. And I think is that it's important to just listen to everything, and then you decide what you want to consume. But the ability to be open to your network and what they have to say is extremely essential, right? I think that's just the way to go day and age. Awesome. Great. Do you have any last thoughts for our listeners based on what we spoke about today?
I think it's a wonderful conversation, and I think it's interesting diving in a little bit more to the more emotive aspects, people aspects, personality aspects of the business. As I think you alluded to, a lot of podcasts you can go down that path, and so it's quite good to go down that path. One of the things that I think that perhaps to share that I've seen, this whole journey has been one of learning about myself. I know that sounds, again, incredibly cliched, and people go traveling to find themselves and what have you, but I think that the experience really has amplified my understanding of who I am as a human being, what I'm good at and what I'm not good at also. And I think that whole process for me has been really enlightening, because it's also given me an opportunity, I think, to know what I need around me as well. And this is not about me here. I mean, everybody has the same requirement. But what are the most important people that I need to have around me to go and fulfill that happiness perhaps in life, if we measure it in that way? And I think my advice, if that's what you're looking for, is most definitely to sometimes take a step back and not put too much pressure on yourself. You only live life once, is again, not small cliches. I think that's my favorite word today, but it is to really understand who you are, know that you're not perfect. No one's the same, but just live the life that you need to live. And I think that's what I'm now trying to do. I think it's probably, again, going down this path has opened up those wonderful doors for me.
Yeah, and it's a process, right? We think we're supposed to get it right and know ourselves immediately, but it's a process. It's a continuous learning process, and I guess we get better at it with time. We do. Yeah, I think.
I don't know.
I think we get better at it.
I'll tell you in a few years more time, and see if I really do know myself.
To hear from you in 10 years and see if are you beating yourself up more? Are you accepting yourself more? How are you reflecting on things? But great. Well, Stuart, I thank you so much for your time. It's our aim to get people thinking about themselves more by learning from entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs. And I thought you'd make a great guest, since you've been through this learning journey yourself and are consistently getting better at making decisions through introspecting and learning about yourself. So guys, for more episodes, don't forget to follow, subscribe, and download this podcast wherever you listen to it. We hope that through these episodes, without taking much of your time, you can get some food for thought, spend some time introspecting, and hopefully find the answers from within to meet your personal and professional goals. This is Nana Kapoor, and this was an episode with Stuart Thornton, founder of Hula. Thank you so much, Stuart, for your time.
No, thank you. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.